evening. It's been a little bit since I streamed anything. I think last time I streamed was the last day I worked on Advent of Code, uh, which Advent of Code was a lot of fun. I made it through first part of day 16. My goal was to make it through part 15, which I did. Yeah, but that was the last time I really streamed. But I enjoyed streaming because it was nice. It was a nice way to force working on something and being productive. And so I think I'm going to try to pick it up a little bit more as a habit, if nothing for selfish reasons, just to give me motivation to sit down after work and focus on a project and make some progress on it. So tonight's project is working on this SDK. So I made an SDK for, if you're not familiar, there's a company called Anthropic, who's an LLM provider. They make an LLM. They make several LLMs available through their API. Most notably, they call all their LLMs Claude. There's several different versions of them, but I made a SDK for their API not too long ago, and so I've just been trying to keep up with it. It has just over 1,000 downloads on NuGet, so I'm guessing that I guess there's people out there using it who are finding value in it. And so I've just been trying to keep up with changes that they've been making. Not necessarily changes, but improvements. They added some new endpoints and some new functionality, and so I've just been kind of updating and maintaining the package as they do that. And so one of the things they added was they added support for doing messages in batches, so you can send them kind of a batch of message requests. Instead of just sending kind of one-off requests, you can send a batch, and they'll work on that batch, and then you can pull their API. You can pull for batches and check to see when batches are complete, and then when batches are complete, you can you can retrieve the results. So that's what I'm working on right now, adding support for. Last night I got the create message batch endpoint working, and I even got a bunch of tests written for it. So I've got one integration test that's working end to end, and so I'm going to add. It's a little loud for me. I don't know how it is for you guys, but it's a little loud for me, so I'm gonna turn it down. Yeah, let me turn it down a little bit. 0.3. I never know how loud to make these things. It sounds so loud to me personally. Could also just be the track. In any event, yeah, that's what I'm going to work on. So where did I leave off? So where I left off was basically I wrote this integration test just to verify that I can send a request and then get a response back. And now I just want to add some tests for some of the other happy paths. Let's see, where am I here? Yeah, this is the method I implemented last night, and so I'm just kind of doing the happy path right now, but I'm going to add a test for the sad path. So And did GitHub Copilot give me what I wanted? Yep, that's it. Oh man, that is probably, that's got to be one of the biggest value adds of Copilot, right? It kind of saw how I've written all the tests up above, um, and so it just infers, that I need to write something similar for this method. So that's what I want to do. So if it returns an error, I want to make sure it serializes the correct type. Cool. So let's check if that runs. Yeah, that's fine. And it did. Cool. Okay, so we've got a test for this path. And then we should add two more tests. We should add a test for when it's unsuccessful, but the content, I can't deserialize the content. And then we should add a test for when it's unsuccessful, can't deserialize the content, and then when it's successful and it can't deserialize the content. So I'm going to add a test for that. Create message batch sync when called and error and or when called request fails and error cannot be deserialized. It should return an unknown error. Yep, that'll do it. I just have this API error that's like a generic error for in the case that they give me an error that I don't know what to do with. I don't know that I wasn't expecting that shape of an error. So let's see if that works. It does. And then the last one is basically the same thing, only in this case, public async task create message sync when called request succeeds and cannot deserialize. It should return an empty response. Yep, that's what it should do. I guess I could even check to just say result value to a new message. All right, I don't pass this. Okay, so I've got a bunch of integration tests. I've got all my unit tests written to support that model. What I don't have test-wise for this method is I don't have an end-to-end test. So let me Anthropic. Let's see, Anthropic API tests end-to-end. And so this is actually going to make a live request. So the way I've approached writing tests for this SDK is I have unit tests, obviously, for models, a lot of deserialization and serialization of like responses and requests. And then I have integration tests that primarily test the client class, which is kind of the entry point for the SDK. And that integration test only, basically all it does is it just mocks. The only thing it mocks is it mocks the HTTP client that you give to the Anthropic API client, which is again is the entry point to this SDK. So it tests everything basically, except for it doesn't make a live call to Anthropic's API. and then I have and that I use to kind of test all of the happy paths and sad paths of the API client's methods. But then I also have some end-to-end tests that are much smaller and more like smoke tests that actually hit the Anthropic service. Uh, um, so I try to keep this to a minimum, and so I'm gonna add one test for creating a batch down here. So let's add that public async task create message batch async and call it should return response. And I know it's a very descriptive test, but I mean that's basically all I'm doing is I'm trying to make basically just trying to make a valid request to the API and verify that they give me back a successful response. Let's see, what doesn't it like? Oh, yeah, I can't do that. So this is actually, so since this is a message batch request, this actually takes a collection of requests, and each collection is going to be an item, and each item needs a custom ID, and so my custom ID is going to be just a GUID. I can just make a new GUID. And this is going to be the request, the message request, which we can do a new one of those up. I'm actually not going to use name parameter there. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just use one of my already built requests. Yeah, so like here, I'm just going to read. I don't need a document one. I just need like a text. Just something simple. Yeah, this will work right here. So we'll just reuse this guy. There. And then we just need to post that. So we'll say result equals, yep. And then we just want to make sure it's successful. It should be of that type. And I'm just going to say result value dot, let's see. Let's just do ID. Should not be null empty, so it should actually be a valid ID. So let's give that a shot. This is actually going to make a live call. So let's debug this. If it's successful, we should be able to see full response. Should be down here somewhere. It looks like it failed. Why did it fail? The JSON value cannot be converted. Path ended at. Okay, so something I done isn't playing nicely with the real world. Oh, I think it's because yeah, I think it's because if I go in here, let's see, if I go in here to the actual method, since we're just working with one screen right here, let's put everything in one tab pane. it's definitely successful. But this response, I think there's some values that are actually null in here, and I'm expecting them to not be null. So let's see. Let's again debug this. Yeah, so the response content. Let's see. Copy value. Oh no, I just closed the whole thing. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay, how do I format this? There'd be like a format. Let's see, format collection or something like that. There we go. It's format code. Yeah, so like all these values are null. And so I need to mark them as such in the response. So I need to go to message response. And I need to change these guys. Which they say this. I actually saw this last night when I was doing this. They note this in their API docs. You go to message batches and you go through their response. They actually note like ended at can be a string or it can be null. Archived at can be a string or null, which makes sense because those values aren't going to be until the batch gets processed to a certain state. They are not going to have a value. So mark them as nullable. No, created at's not nullable. Archived at is nullable. Cancel initiated at is nullable. Oh, not the name. Type. And this will be nullable. Okay, so now let's get rid of this guy. Let's go back to our tests. And this time let's remove our breakpoint here. And let's debug, run debug. I know, very exciting stuff here. And there we go. Cool. Okay, so now we can create a batch. So let's get a message here. Let's see. Fix, make rect properties nullable. Integration tests, add integration test for remaining sad and then add end-to-end test for creating a message. should be able to push these up, right? Let's see. I do that in Writer. I'm still I'm still very much figuring out Writer. Let's see. I can just do it from the console. Okay. So now we're going to actually implement a new method on our client. So we did creating a message batch. So the next logical one is we should be able to retrieve that same message that we just created, because that's basically the workflow behind this feature, behind this batch feature, is basically you post your batch and then you pull the batch until you get the processing status of complete, or I think it's succeeded or something like that. Let's see. Processing status in progress, canceling, or ended. So you basically pull until you get ended, and then when it's ended, you can grab the result. So let's add a class to represent these. That might be nice for people. So let's just go into our models. Let's see, not in our test project, in here. So actually, let's do it. Let's try to stick with good test-driven development. So let's go into our unit tests. Let's add a new test class. This is going to be called message. Excuse me, message batch status test.cs. Do you want to add? Yes, I would like to. Don't show this again. Always add it. Let's see. Yep, and then fact, we should have just as a public void. Let's see. That is not what we want. GitHub Copilot, you are too eager. We basically just want to make sure it has some static or some constants that return these strings. That's basically all we want to do. So in progress, canceling, and ended. Canceling when called, it should return canceling status. And then all we're going to say is we're just going to say this will be a static class. This is just instead of having an enum, which is kind of how I've been writing the stuff in the SDK, is not really using enums, but using just static classes that have constants, which are strings, constant strings. And I've been doing that just because I kind of like the pattern matching feature in C#. I kind of like that syntax of like, you could do like message batch dot status is, and then message batch dot status dot canceling or something like that. So we'll say message batch status dot canceling, and that should return. Let's see how they format it. Should return canceling, all lowercase. And this is one of the I think this is one of the best parts about if you do try to follow kind of a TDD, test-driven development workflow. And I'll be the first one to admit I don't always follow it when I'm working on my projects, but I've been trying to use all the opportunities I can to follow it, because one of the nice things it does is it does give you the opportunity to kind of write the shape of the API shape of your code in your tests, so you sort of figure out like what's the way that you would want someone to be able to use this or type this. What's the ergonomic? It kind of allows you to work through the ergonomics of the code you're going to write. So let's go ahead and actually add that class. Add class message batch status. And like I said, this is going to just be a public static class and public const string, like that. And it's yelling at me because I need to make sure and add some XML docs. And this is like what GitHub Copilot is made to do, right? Look at that. Boom. And so now my test should pass. Okay, and then we'll just write the remaining ones, which is just going to be in progress and end. I just need to copy these. Let's say in progress and end it. Ended is kind of an interesting status. You don't see that. Don't see that one very often. You can definitely tell that. I mean, obviously Python's huge, right, in the AI world and data science, machine learning. But you can definitely tell, like, when you're looking at it's funny how, like, the more you interact with different languages, the more you're able to see those idiosyncrasies. What's the word? Idiosyncrasies of these different languages, right? So, like, if you look at Anthropic's API docs, right, they have a lot of snake casing in particular enum values. They have a lot of, like, snake casing in their like even their IDs, snake casing in their endpoints. So you can tell, like, they're definitely ahead. This API is probably written with some sort of Python API framework, to Django, or Fast API, I think, is another one. But yeah, it's kind of funny how you notice that stuff, right? You same thing with, like, C# and .NET, right? You can kind of, looking at a particular API's documentation, you can kind of pick up, oh, this is definitely written is .NET and written in C# or something like that. Or you can say, oh, this is definitely a TypeScript based app. Which, I mean, no hate on any of the languages. It's just kind of interesting. You may act, and other people might see me writing a test for a class like this and think, man, that's so silly. But I honestly couldn't care less what other people think about this, since it's my project and I can do what I want. But I think the more tests, the better, even for simple stuff. Okay, so there we got a little sidetrack there, but that will be nice because now, if people are consuming the SDK and they're creating batches and checking for batch status, now they kind of have a nice way to do something like, they can do something like this: var response equals new message batch response. So imagine this is actually coming from an API call, and then they could do something like if response dot processing status is, right? They can use that nice pattern matching syntax because these are constant values. We can say const dot canceling, right? I mean, you can still do your your typical equals, you know. But there's something nice. I don't know. Personally, there's something nice I like about this syntax uh, in if statements and switch statements and things like that. Conditional checks. I think it reads really nicely. And you can't really do that with an enum, right? Like you can't enum status, right? You're not going to be able to say var response equals. Watch me be proven wrong. Can't really say if response dot processing status is status dot canceling. Or can you? I guess if this was let's see var yeah, I guess you can with enums too. I can't remember. I thought that's why I had decided to do these kind of static constant classes. There must have been another reason why I just I don't know. For whatever reason, when I started writing the SDK, I said it's kind of one of those funny things, right? When you're writing code, you can't remember why some of the choices you made, but one of the choices I made was I just didn't use a lot of enums in the project, and so I've just kind of stuck with that. I guess it is kind of nice. It's much easier to deal with strings when you're deserializing. I think system.text.json has like a built-in enum string converter, but okay, enough talking about constant strings. Let's commit that. Let's commit it, right? Let's see. We add class for representing batch statuses. And now let's actually get back to what we actually want to do, which is we actually want to implement retrieving a message. So I need to hit this endpoint. We provide this message batch ID, and then we just get back a message batch response, which I already have. I already have this represented in code and tested. So this one should be actually pretty straightforward. So if we're following good TDD, we can actually we can start with the test. So I'm going to start with an integration test in here, and I'm getting to the point where I probably need to break up this file. It's getting pretty long. It's over 1,000 lines. It wasn't too bad when my client just had like a single. I think my client had like 2 methods to begin with. One method for creating a message, and then one for creating a message but streaming it back. But now it's getting a lot bigger. I should probably segregate these out. Maybe even I should segregate the methods in the client out, like refactor it into some sort of facade where the API client is still the entry point, is still the single entry point, but maybe the API client sort of acts as a facade for some other classes, and maybe group the methods more about kind of what they're doing, like interacting with messages, counting tokens, dealing with batches. But that's something for another day. So we'll say get message batch async. When called, it should return a batch. We'll just want to give it a batch ID, which is fine. We'll respond with this fake response. Yeah, that should work. Let's see. Can you finish this guy? That should be that. But now, granted, I'm going to have some errors here because I haven't actually implemented that method. But this is kind of, again, this is kind of going back to this idea, right, of like writing the shape of your kind of writing the shape of your API in your test, right? Kind of what's the ideal method you want? What parameters should it take? In this case, it's really simple method. Copilot generated the right name. That'll work. We do need to generate this method. So these are just some helper methods. Excuse me. Let's do I not have a refactor that would just... I figured there'd be some way I could just like add a... Yeah, I don't know. That surprises me. Let's see. So I need to basically add another. So this is a library called mock HTTP. I don't know. You may not be familiar with it. It's by a guy named Richard Soleil. I think that's how you say his name. Richard Soleil. It's called mock HTTP. This is, if you don't know about it, this is a great library for allowing you to do kind of integration testing and avoid having to actually make an actual HTTP call somewhere or figure out your own way of mocking it. And it provides a really nice fluid interface. You can basically say, hey, when you see this URL, respond with this information. And you can do things like, when you see this URL with these specific query params, with this specific body content, respond with this information. And that's all I'm doing. In my code here, I've just created some helper, some extension methods, so that I don't have to redefine the same, when you see this URL, or when you see, I'm just kind of doing it in one helper extension method, kind of like you can see here, where I'm basically saying, it needs to have these headers always set, and then for each of the endpoints, I kind of have these helper methods to say, when it's the message endpoint and it has the stream attribute set, then you should respond with whatever mock data I've given you. So let's create a method. Public static. Yep, that'll work. Man, Copilot it saves you so much time. Drawstring. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I guess that'd work. I'm okay with how it was. Okay, so we've got our method to mock the endpoint and respond with this response. Now we need to actually go implement this in the client. So let's go to Anthropic API client. And the first thing we'll do is we'll define it on the interface. So where are we creating our batch? Up here, so we'll say task. It'll be an Anthropic result, and it'll basically have the same return type: message, batch, response. We're going to call it get message batch async, and we'll just give it a batch ID. We want to make sure and add our comments, and Copilot will do all that heavy lifting for me. Wonderful. Now that we've added that to the interface, my API client is now out of compliance, so we need to implement that. And we'll actually want to decorate this with inherent doc. So that, if you've never seen that before, that just is a way to tell a way to basically instruct that the comment or the XML document, XML comment that's documenting the interface method, that comment should just apply to the actual implementation on this class too. If you wanted to, you could actually, have a separate comment here on the actual implementation, but I mean, doesn't make a lot of sense. I think if you're implementing an interface, I don't know, maybe your specific implementation does something a little bit differently, so you do want to change the comment, but in this case, we're fine with the way it is. So this is going to look very similar to this method up here. Actually, it's going to look very similar to a lot of methods in this client. All we need to do is we need to send the request. So I have a helper method to do that. Yeah, send the request like this. And I think this is fine. We could probably have a method that builds this. Let's see. Let's go back to their docs. Let's see. This is always going to be batches ID. This is going to be batches ID / results. Cancel a batch. I guess we're going to build this URL twice. I guess it could be a method, but I'm just going to use string interpolation. I think this is fine. So we'll say, okay, so then we get the response. So all the methods basically do the same thing, right? We're going to send a request to the API endpoint. This send request method is just a helper. It just wraps. Let's see, where is it? It's down here somewhere. Yeah, there's two versions of it. One that takes an endpoint, one that takes a request. And all it does is it just wraps the actual HTTP client and makes a request with it, and then just hands back the raw HTTP response message instance so that I can work with it in my method. So we have the response. The first thing we're going to do with the response is we are going to get our headers. So the Anthropic API always responds with a specific set of headers that basically has a lot to do with like limits, token limits, request limits, information about when you can retry, how long you should wait to retry. So we always get an instance of those headers. Then we get our content, and we just begin by reading it as a string because we don't know if it was successful or not successful. We just want whatever content was in the body. Then we'll actually check and see if it was successful. If it wasn't successful, then we are going to just deserialize it to an Anthropic error. If we can't deserialize it, then we'll just return an empty error. And then we will return a Anthropic result of this particular type with the error set in the header set. And this is just kind of a really simple implementation of the result pattern. If you're not familiar with that, the result pattern is kind of like because so C# doesn't have discriminated unions, so the result pattern is sort of a way to try to have that the same ergonomics of a discriminated union. But basically, the idea is basically either a result can be successful, it can be a failed result. And if it's a successful result, then it actually has a value. And if it's a failed result, then it has an error. This is, I mean, there's much more sophisticated implementations of this. Complete NuGet packages. The one I've used is called Fluent Result, which is a really nice implementation. It's got a lot of extra cool functionality that you can do with it. Much more robust. But I implemented something similar to represent responses from the Anthropic API. So a call to their API can succeed or it can fail. So a result makes the most sense, the best way to represent it. And then Anthropic has a standardized error shape. Let's see if errors. So they kind of have a standardized shape for their errors that look like this. It's got a type, and then it's got the actual error object, and then the actual error object has a type on it, and then it has a message. And so that's all that my Anthropic error class does. It just represents all the different documented versions of their errors. Okay, and then if it is successful, then we're going to deserialize it to a message batch response. If we can't deserialize it, then we will return an empty response and return success. And that should be it. So now if we go back to our integration test, let's see, it should compile now, and it should also pass. So if we run this, it should pass. Let's see. Nice. Okay, and then just like the other one, we will add some tests for all the different happy paths and sad paths. Excuse me. When error called, it should handle the error. Yep. Then if we get an error but we can't deserialize it, it should just be an API error. And then if it's successful and we can't deserialize a response, it should just be an empty response, which is cool. All of these should pass now. Well, let's run all the integration tests. Yep, they should all pass. Okay, cool. So we've got all our integration tests for that method. Now we should just add a end-to-end test. So we have another class similarly named, but it's in a different namespace. It's in the end-to-end. And so what we will do is we will say fact public async ask message, or no, sorry, not create message, get message batch async, and call it return a response. And maybe Copilot can figure out what we want to do here. Maybe he can't. Maybe he needs a little help. So the first thing we're going to do is we need to create a batch, because this is an actual end-to-end test. So we actually, in order to retrieve a batch back from the API, we need to have a batch there. So we should have a new request. Oops, not in the terminal. Let's see, yep. There you go, Copilot. Cool. And then actually, you know what? Yeah. So we need the message batch ID. So we should create a request. And we just want to make sure that let's see. We should probably should we assert something? We can say var get result, and then we can assert here. Should be true. Yep, and they should equal each other. I'm actually just going to stick a breakpoint here because I kind of like to see what the actual responses look like when we're running live against their API. So we have the created result. It has a value. There we go. It's in progress. Still in progress. But you can see those IDs are the same. Cool. These message batches can take up to 24 hours to process, if I remember right, based on their API. I'm guessing they don't actually take that long, but that's... Yeah, once a batch is created, it begins processing immediately. Batches can take up to 24 hours to complete. I'm curious how long... Kind of curious how long we'd have to wait to actually see a completed batch. Let's just see. What if I did I looped and I said while not ended. Let's see. See how long we'll have to wait. Let's see. We'll just set a breakpoint here. Let's see how many times we have to make that request. And let's actually throw a delay in here, right? So wait task.delay. I don't know. What do you think? 5 seconds, something like that. That seems reasonable. And let's just put a count. These are count. Curious. I never actually used these endpoints in an app or anything, so I'm just kind of curious. What it's like. So this is a very simple message, obviously, too. So I'd expect it to process relatively quickly. Let's see. Debug. But maybe I'm guessing they have some sort of queue, right? They're working off some sort of queue. So I guess it's wherever your batch gets put in the line and how busy how busy their queue is. Seven requests so far. Still in progress. So it could actually, I mean, obviously I'm not going to be able to write my test so that it waits till it has a result though. I'm going to let it keep running though, because I'm curious. But you can see like a batch may contain up to 100,000 requests and be up to 256 megabytes in size. I'm kind of curious what people are actually using this for, right? Because like most people that are building apps around this type of API are doing things like kind of almost like either in a chat interface or some sort of user driven thing where the user is expecting like a result. So I'm wondering what use case is it that it's acceptable for a request to take 24 hours and then what they do with it. I guess you could probably do like some evaluation things with it. But I'm curious if they give any kind of large-scale tasks such as data set analysis, classification of large data sets, or extensive model evaluations. I guess model evaluations would be the one right off the top of my head that I feel like would be super helpful. Okay, so it did finish. Okay, so where are we here? Where's my did it exit? Or has it not? It hasn't finished yet, has it? Yeah, it's not finished. So we're at 33. Let's see, so we're 5 or 10 minutes in. It still hasn't finished. Huh. That's interesting to me, honestly. I just wouldn't think it would take this long to get a response. Quora, a user-based question and answer platform, leverages Anthropic's Batches API for summarization and highlight extraction to create new end-user features. It's kind of so I guess like you're thinking I guess you have some sort of batch process where you just generate summarizations on a periodic basis, and it's okay if they take a while to complete. Whenever they complete, we'll take what was completed and we'll stick it where it needs to go, and then we can display it in our UI where we want to display it, I guess. I'm curious. Anthropic message batch. How long on average? Well, I guess that's another good point. There's a cost, right? There's a cost reduction. It is offered at a 50% discount for both input and output tokens. So that's compelling, right? If your use case doesn't need real-time immediate response. I'm wondering, like, how often are these guys polling? Like, when you actually implement this, how often are you polling for the batch? Because I don't think they let you. Um, I don't think that they let you specify like a notification. Like, you can't say, "Hey, when this is done, notify me at XYZ place." Um, I guess I can. I guess I can get a list of all the batches that I have in process too. Yeah. Well, I'll check back in, but obviously this takes longer than my test can allow. So we're not going to do that. We just want to basically make sure that we can get the batch after we create it, and we can. So run. Cool. So real quick, let me implement get message cat async push. Nope. Push all that up. That's fine. And then real quick, let me run my test suite. This should run all my tests, and then I'm gonna take a look at the code coverage. Oh, I'm gonna figure out why this test fails. Oh, because I changed the nullability of those properties. Okay, so this is a message batch response test. Let's see. Message at response. Yeah. So now that these are nullable, the default's not going to be min. It's going to be something else. It's going to be null. So this is going to be null. I want that. I don't know if I want that. I think if someone news, I think what I want is if someone news this up. Someone news this up. I want this to be the min value. But if but if it's deserialized, it can be deserialized from null. I'm not a big fan of null values floating around. If you can help it. Let's see. I think there may have been. Okay, so those all passed. Let's take a look at results. Let's see, does this have us? Oh, nice. Okay. So yeah, we're still at 99%, which was which was the, oh my goodness, which was the beginning line coverage. So, and it looks like we're good. There's some areas in some of this that I've just accepted. I'm not gonna validate, and those all remain the same. Everything else is covered. So we implemented that. So git add git commit in fix vault nullable properties date time offset value when new deal. Good deal. All right, the question is, do we want to do another one? I don't know if we want to do another one. This is kind of an interesting one because this is actually the result. And it would probably be good to have a message batch that is completed. But I wonder, I don't know if I'll be able to do a very good smoke, end-to-end test on this because I don't know how long they keep the batches around for. They expire at some point. It looks like they expire after 24 hours. Let's see. Anthropic message expiration. Batch results are available for 29 days after creation. After that, you may still view the batch, but its results will no longer be available for download. Yeah, so that might be one where I just have to make do with an integration test, because it just doesn't make sense to have an end-to-end test since this stuff takes so long to process. But the interesting with the batch results is they actually recommend. So the response is a file. The response is actually a JSON file, a JSON new line file, which is basically just a bunch of JSON objects separated by new lines. But they recommend that you actually stream this in. So I think this method is actually going to need two different. It's going to be. What I want to say. It's going to have two different. Where I'm gonna have to represent this. I think with two different methods. I think we're going to need a method that retrieves all the results and just returns it as maybe like a list or something. Maybe a list of these objects, right? So someone wants to get them all together in memory. But then we're probably also going to want like some sort of like an async enumerable, so we can yield up them one by one, kind of like what we do with the way we stream messages. The messages are streamed in chunks of text and this will be streaming in basically JSON objects separated by lines, and we'll just parse the JSON object and yield it. Which shouldn't be too bad. That's what we're doing with, that's what we're already doing for the messages. If you go into the client, we have a method. It's kind of a messy method. It's a messy method, but that's what we're basically doing. It's super long, but basically what we're doing is we're reading the response content as a stream. We're getting the line. We read a line from the stream, and then we parse that line into the corresponding event type. Basically, take a string of text and then turn it into a strongly typed object, which is what we'll probably do with the results. I don't know if I want to go down that road right now. It's a little bit involved for 11:30 at night. I don't know what I'm going to do anymore. I do kind of want to see... Let me go off screen here for a second. I think... let's see. List all batches within a workspace. See batches in Oh yeah, I can see all my batches here. Well, is there any sensitive information on this? Sensitive information. So this is kind of interesting. So you can actually see the batches running here. So none of even the one I created at 10:30 is still in progress. Interesting. I'll be interested. I'll let these run. It'd be interesting to actually complete. I wonder if I mean, I could be doing something wrong. Maybe I'm doing something wrong with how I'm making my request. But I'm guessing they're using a queue, right? So it's just first in, first. Excuse me, first in, first out. So if there's a lot of people in front of me, I might be waiting for a while. I think what I'll do, the next thing I'll do is, I guess the next thing I'll do is I'll work on the list of message batches, because I don't really want to work on the batch results until I can actually see some of those results myself. I mean, I don't have to. I mean, they give me the shape of the data and everything, but I'd like to be able to do some testing when I'm doing the implementation against a live result. Yeah, so I don't think I'm gonna do it tonight though. It's 11:30. Been streaming for about an hour and a half. I think I'm gonna wind down for the evening. Yeah, this is good. I feel like the stream is it's a good excuse to sit down and focus on something and make some progress. And I did that tonight, and so I'm happy. And we'll just, yeah, I don't know how often I'll do it. If it'll be every evening or what, or if it'll always be in the evening. It might be during the day. Maybe do it over lunch, uh, while everyone's out of the house or something. In any event, I hope you guys had a good holidays. I haven't been on here since the holidays, so I hope you had a good end to your holidays and a good start to your new year, and you're off and running. Other than that, yeah, I guess I'll see you guys. I'll see you guys next time. Good night.